Acolytes, let's praise our Lord and Savior, Gabe, from Steam. You know the guy. A powerful creature that even I have to bow against if it comes to freaking games. Let's hope that his tyranny will move on and live on until he, passes away. Because it's a good one. And I love it. But there is some news that Bulwa said big studio called Steam a monopoly, but it's a setup. Let's see. Because actually Steam is the best site for consumers and actual creators. They actually hit a balance there where everyone, in my opinion at least, maybe I don't know everything, but as I see it, everybody is treated pretty fair. The customer, the creator, and the store itself. Because don't forget, if a store doesn't have money, it fails. And we have with Gabe such a freaking positive thing here that, I mean, if he goes away, we're fucked. Everybody.
Okay, this one's going to be a real touchy subject. So, 306 game studios were just surveyed about Steam. 75% were senior executives, 77% were from companies with 50 plus employees, and 72% called it a monopoly. And by it I mean Steam. They called Steam a monopoly. But here's the thing. The company behind this survey, the survey that's caused this news story that's led to a lot of sparks over the internet, well, that company is not exactly neutral on this matter. And I think to make all of this so much more relevant, Valve just announced their return to console gaming with the Steam machine. And certainly, the more powerful that Valve gets, and the more the scope of their company touches, in terms of hardware and platform stuff, well, the more that happens, the larger the target on their back will grow.
Yes.
And that's why we do need to talk about.
And by the way, I think Monopoly has a legal thing behind it, so it's not somehow legally not good. But I'm gonna be honest, as long as they treat us right, I do not give a fuck. I rather have a freaking positive tyrant, a kind tyrant, than a fucked up white knight. So, but that's just me.
This today. These were not random developers. The survey targeted decision maker managers who basically knew their company's financials. It covered US and UK studios only, 2/3 were American, 1/3 were British, and it was heavily weighted towards the bigger operations, which I think should tell us something. Now, 77% were from studios with over 50 employees, so basically, the kinds of companies that should, in theory, benefit some of the most from Steam's volume discounts. If you're not aware, by the way, if you hit 10 million USD revenue, then you actually get a change in your Steam cut down to 25%, and I believe if it's over 50 million in revenue, then that goes down to 20%. So even though many of these companies will be getting preferential treatment, 53% said that they were concerned about depending on Steam. Now here's why that percentage is as high as it is, though some would argue that what I'm about to say should probably justify the percentage of studios being suspicious or frustrated actually being higher. So here's the numbers. For 88% of these studios, Steam generates 75% of their revenue. For 37% of them, it's 90% of their revenue. Basically, these companies don't choose Steam. They need Steam. They can't really do without it. That means that anything that happens on or to Steam represents risk. I mean, for an example, whenever Valve changed the adult content policies this summer, spicy little story, that...
By the way, I still think they were forced to. Because I do not believe for a second that Steam would just basically cut a revenue stream as big as PORN games. No effing way.
That impacted a lot of developers who functionally lost their entire market overnight with no appeal and no alternative. Now obviously Activision isn't out there making 18 plus smut games on Steam, but I think you understand the issue. Now to give you a taste of the scale here, Steam pulled in 10.8 billion in 2024, they had 41.6 million concurrent users in October, which was up from 25.4 million in 2021. That is a rate of growth that's absolutely wild. And of course, as Steam grows, relatively speaking, their competitors end up shrinking. And as times went on, their positions only got more solid and more dominant. So when asked directly whether they think Steam holds a monopoly, these executives gave a fairly clear answer. 72% of them said yes. But here's where things get interesting.
Who gives a fuck? Honestly, who gives a fuck? I don't care. Because at this point, those people are so fucked up in the head. We have a big portion of them being just total effing Karens, useless, mother flippers, and if those mother effers say, oh, it's a monopoly, it's bad, blah blah blah, don't believe them. Or do you want more games like Concord? Exactly, those are those fucking people. Fuck them. I don't care. If they say something's bad, do the opposite. Do the exact opposite.
So what have I told you? There was a conflict of interest involved. Do you know what kind of drives me mad? Walking out of a video planning meeting with lots of scribbled ass notes that may as well be hieroglyphics, feeling stressed while half the action items missing, and by the time I decipher what I wrote, I kind of forgot the context, and it just stresses me out. But it's where today.
Wait, what? He actually prepares videos? I actually plan gaming stuff, quote unquote, do it step by step. I never write something down. It's more of a idea, I do it and then move on. But hey, it is what it is, I guess.
Sponsor, the Plod Note, has become essential for me. It's an AI meeting assistant that's the size of a credit card that magnetically attaches to my phone, which is great. It's a separate thing, so no draining the phone battery, no storage warnings, no call interruptions. Just one click and I can capture up to 30 hours while I actually stay present and in the moment, not looking at my phone. Here's what it actually does. It captures everything from a 2 to 3 meter range. It transcribes with speaker labels. It then auto-generates summaries with action items and key highlights that I can share with the team. And the Ask Plod feature means I
mean, it sounds nice, but you can use
search
just
across
Excellent.
all of my meetings or brainstorm. So I could say, what did Jared say about that lower timeline in that
I cannot skip it.
And it would be able to tell me. It's brilliant for personal.
No, wait, this is daily news. This is basically slop what Beloar is doing here. What the fuck? Fuck this. I mean, I also produce slop. That's why I don't get any freaking sales here. No,
the
it's not
survey actually came from a company called Rocky. And if you haven't heard of Rocky, basically, there's a good reason for that. They're a B2B company. You'd never really see them as a consumer. And what they do is they help publishers sell games on non-Steam platforms. And essentially, they believe that they can undercut grey market key resellers, who of course are the ones that are out there exploiting international currency differences. But for their business model to work, it requires developers to put games in more markets. And that means more stores. Many of which, if you are, say, the typical Western listener of this channel, you may not have even heard of. But basically, more games everywhere, but not Steam. That's basically what they want. So from Rocky's perspective, they would love developers to embrace platforms like Gamivo, Kinguin, Iniba, and Driffle.
Fuck them. Fuck them. Simply fuck them. I don't care. I don't care. Never heard of those. Never will, probably. You know why? Because they sound like fucking scams. Gamivo, Kinguin, Eneba, and Driffle. Sorry, all of them sound like fucking scams.
Half of those I recognized. But here's the problem with that. Developers simply aren't using those platforms. They're not taking them seriously. And one of the reasons why is because their entire audience lives on Steam. So, in order to make some hay out of this, Rocky commissioned this survey that led to them asking 306 studios about Steam's dominance, and they got the exact headline that they wanted. Quote, 72% of developers think Steam is a monopoly. It's a good headline, a spicy one. It sparked debate. I saw this all over the place. But obviously, that's not 72% of all developers.
Exactly.
It is 72% of the ones that they sampled, and they have an obvious agenda. But even with that obvious agenda, there is something that developers don't tend to say out loud. You gotta remember that two things can be true. Yes, this is obviously biased by Rocky, But also, yes, some of the results are revealing. To go through them, 35.9% strongly agreed that Steam is a monopoly, 36.3% slightly agreed, and 19% held no opinion, with just over 8% disagreeing. That's a fairly large split, right? But here's actually the catch. The survey never defined monopoly. Studios just made up their own definition of monopoly. It was whatever was conjured up in the head of the person responding to the survey. Now, critics have argued this issue for over a decade, and one guy who we often go to because real sound analysis is Matt Piscatella, and he flagged this up, that people have been calling Steam a monopoly since 2010, and that's despite the fact that back then, their market share was far weaker than it is today. And to run you through just how much Steam has grown, by 2013, Steam held 75% of PC gaming. Now, of course, our boy Tim Sweeney would, in 2023, go on to put that at 85%. But, of course, the Epic Game Store exists, GOG exists, Amazon tried and failed like so many others. So technically, yeah, Steam is not the only store. It isn't a complete insane monopoly. Valve does not control the supply of games. They just happen to be the best distributor of games. And you can easily argue that there's nothing stopping someone else from coming along and making something better than Steam. Anyone can compete, but what Steam does have is something that's far more powerful, and that is influence over their audience and a majority of the market share. One commenter I saw when I was going through my research for this really nailed it by saying, quote, "It seems wrong to call it a monopoly when everyone else just puts out objectively worse alternatives." Honestly, I find that pretty agreeable. And another person who seems to is Larian's director of publishing. Obviously, Baldur's Gate 3 did real well on Steam, and part of that game's development model was facilitated by Steam's early access system. But he said, it's almost as if it isn't providing a shit service defined by public shareholder KPIs. Yeah, so I think he's making his point very clearly, and basically, for the average consumer, yeah, Steam's absolutely awesome. It's also not a technical...
Yeah, it is. It is. For F's sake, I will defend Steam until they actually fuck up. Right now, one of the fucking best. And I think Pirate Software criticized it, and if this fucker criticizes something, like this lying son of a bitch, get the opposite. Hear the opposite, do the opposite.
Monopoly, if you want to use some of the technical terminology, it's what you'd call an oligopoly, which basically is the absolute dominant player. And now, even if you build something that's better than Steam, the real point, and I suppose the oligopoly point, is that 85% of the market, as of 2023, it could actually be higher by now, has already got their library there. So what that means is that Steam technically is not a monopoly. They are just so dominant that that distinction stops functionally mattering. And it is exactly why governments are actually starting to pay attention. And for Valve, there is one little black mark in their history that could really damage their arguments. It's in the form of a leaked email, and that's what we'll get to next. By now, we've established that if you can't sell your game in Steam, you basically can't reach most of the audience. And many Steam lovers would also say, yeah, look, if the game's not in Steam, I just don't want to deal with the faff of having lots of different launchers on my computer.
Correct. Correct. And also, I was on Epic Games. I put something on it and I regretted it. Because all the fucking time there are some kind of problems, be it saving, be it like if you close the game, the cloud doesn't get it, and it's all the time. I mean, this also happens on Steam from time to time, don't get me wrong, but happening from time to time and being a constant are two different things. And it's the problem is to this day. The shop looks like shit, everything else also. I mean, I don't blame people if they go on Epic Games, because, yeah, fair enough. Oh, the only thing that actually has a chance against, or in my opinion, a good chance against Steam, is good old games. They actually do everything fantastically. I have both, and I don't regret buying games on GOG. Because they actually function freaking awesome. And they also include, like, most of the time, I don't know if it's every time, but if you have like a fan-made update for a game so it works better, they instantly include it in the installation, no matter what. So yeah, freaking awesome service, GOG and Steam both fantastic.
That's understandable, but consolidation does come with problems. Adult game makers very much learned that this summer, but the impact goes beyond just the adult game people and beyond.
Oh, and by the way, Steam support, freaking awesome. Never had a problem with them. Even if I had a bigger problem once, they just said, okay, good, let's do this. And we found a solution. And I am not a guy that dwells on, oh, how bad it is. No, I am solution oriented. If I get a solution, I am happy. And I got one. A very good one. There is a short where you call the Epic Game Store support. The guy is like, okay, hey, I have problems with games. The Epic Game Store support is like, well, not my problem, fuck you. The guy reaches Steam support and Steam support, okay, you got hacked. Which game? Yeah, we tracked them. You hear gunshots in the background that are like, okay, we dealt with it. Have a nice day. That's basically the difference in quality of actually the customers are there. So I think I'm not the only one.
On just developers. This is where we've got to talk about the United Kingdom and Poland. That's because both are investigating Steam for anti-competitive practices, where basically they want to understand if being both a store and a platform is harming consumers. Now, of course, you may argue that Steam has done nothing wrong, right? They provide multiplayer tools, they provide relatively cheap games, great downloads, but even with that, there are still ways to compete. Just take a look at GOG, right? They sell DRM-free games, they champion preservation. That's competition, that's them standing out in the market. But obviously GOG does not have Steam's market share, and nobody is selling third-party keys for GOG Galaxy. So what do you do when there's technically competition, but it doesn't really matter? Now, here's where things get real interesting and legally interesting. Because Steam is both a store and a platform, they have what's called a most favored nation clause. And what that means is that if you generate Steam keys, then you must price them comparatively to Steam. And of course, in isolation, that's completely reasonable, right? That makes a lot of sense. If you're going to go and generate a Steam key and then sell it to someone, you shouldn't be undercutting Valve and Valve's store, because they're the people who will be distributing and, all of those other things, that game. But where this gets messy is when we go global. Now, this report from Apillion shows that almost all of Steam's recent growth has came from non-English speaking users. Yet, Steam's automated currency conversion actively harms some regions with outdated exchange rates. And this is definitely true. I get loads of emails from people saying that this is a real problem where they live. And that is actually why Poland's government is investigating, because they believe that Steam's policies are hurting Polish players. If you combine the currency conversion rates, which quite often end up being bullshit, with the most favored nation clause, then you've basically got a huge problem where the price floor for selling your game is being dictated by a bad currency conversion rate on Steam.
I have to look into it, because Poland normally does good things, but all things come to an end at some point, so yeah.
And I think it's reasonable to say that, say in the case of Poland, that would be hurting the Polish consumer. But here's where things get a little bit worse for Valve, and this is what they need to be careful about. You see, there's a class action suit, we've talked about it before, it's from Willfire Games. Now, expert witness emails revealed that Steam support once told developers that the most favored nation clause applied to non-Steam keys. And if there's anything in this video that I suppose is counter to Valve that I'd like you to think about the most, it is this one. This is the one that I think does matter. So, if you are a developer and you decide to sell a DRM-free version of your game, and it's on your own website, which would mean that all you'd really pay is the payment processing fee, so more money would go back to you. If you do that, according to this email, Valve may block you from Steam entirely. Now remember, I'm not talking about a Steam key being sold off Steam. I am talking about just a DRM-free version of your game being sold on, say, a developer store or any other store. And that's quite tricky, because Steam, controls about 85% of the market. But if Steam's rules then dictate prices for the remaining 15% of the market, well, that is when words like anti-competition and monopoly actually get serious. And by serious, I mean governments can start getting involved. And obviously, if you're Valve, you really don't want that. The tough thing about a video like this is I basically know that I really like using Steam. Almost all of you guys really like using Steam as well. Yet here we are doing a video that is at least entertaining loads of criticisms of Steam. And there's a good reason for that, because Steam really is fairly awesome. I mean, the critics will focus on the 30% cut, but I'd say that's not the real issue with Steam. It's not the real thing that people care about. I think it's basically that Valve is a mission-driven company. It's about video games. They don't have shareholders in this sort of publicly traded company way. They don't have quarterly earnings calls where, oh dear, if they miss their guidance, their stock price will just go way down. That's why I brought up that tweet from Larian's director of publishing where he said that Steam is, not providing a shit service that's defined by public shareholder KPIs. Because funnily enough, users and shareholders often will want different things. And when we look across the market, yes, there's Epic, but obviously there's the Tencent stake in Epic as well. There's Microsoft with Game Pass, there's Amazon with its failed Luna. These are all companies that in some way are answering to shareholders, whereas with Valve, Gabe owns the company, right? And I think that does actually show in the product. Look across Steam. They sell everything from your big AAA blockbusters to bizarre indie experiments. It's a lot. And sure, this summer's adult content crackdown did change things a little bit, but even with that, Valve were trying to be more hands-off. Even looking through Steam's upcoming games, you just see weird little experiments from random developers that don't tend to get surfaced in other places. And where that's relevant for today's discussion, well, by carrying games like that, Valve actually enables a market. And by enabling that market and providing access to customers, what do? Well, they create more competition between developers, which is good for the consumer. And as they are directly financially tied to core PC gaming, their incentives are far better aligned than most, like say PlayStation or Xbox. Now, the 30% is still really big, and at least you could say that Xbox and PlayStation earn their cut via loss-leading consoles that create a market. Obviously, Steam Deck has been a little bit involved, and the Steam machine will probably mean that Valve's moving a little more in that direction. But with Steam, for the most part, just being a middleman in PC, but a really good middleman, we get amazing discoverability, which increases sales. We get refunds done right, which I would argue increases sales because consumers feel like they're actually protected. And if I wanted to, I could just yammer on for another few minutes, glazing the hell out of Valve for all the good things that they've done. But here's the thing. The documents forced out of Valve at trial did reveal where critics have a point regarding the monopoly. So let's get to business, and here's where things get a bit problematic. So, Epic offers developers an 88-12 split. That is far better than Steam's 70-30 split. But here's where you, the consumer, are actually hurt. Because developers cannot pass on the savings that they get from the Epic Store to consumers. Now, if the Epic Store was somehow selling Steam keys, then I'd argue that's complete
bullshit. You can always press them on, no matter what. You just can.
Be fair, because Valve would be providing the infrastructure, the bandwidth, the service, customer support, and many other things. So of course Steam keys should match Steam prices. But those Wolfire emails reveal something different, that Steam did threaten to delist games sold cheaper on other stores. Not Steam keys, just the game, sold anywhere, without using any of Steam's infrastructure. And what that does is that kills price competition. And that is something that means that you will, on average, pay more.
I'm gonna be honest, yes. Yes, this is bad. This is just a thinking that I just actually realized. Wouldn't it also mean if Steam dictates the prices as they are? Good, we pay more, yes. But wouldn't it also mean that the developers get more? Because if Steam is gigantic. At the end, if you sell something for a cheaper price, they have to get into it and sell it also on a cheaper price. So the developers would actually suffer under it exactly the same way. I mean, I don't give a fuck about the developers, but I think it could be maybe that there is a positive in it, but maybe I overthink it.
For the products that you get. And even worse than that, it is Steam competing against the rest of the market, not by leveraging its amazing user experience, its developer-centric features, its discoverability. No, that's Steam competing by just leveraging its ubiquity, by saying, hey, we're really big, this rule functionally applies to all of you, and we know you can't afford to violate this rule. That effectively checkmates the Epic Game Store, and it means that the market can't really self-correct. That means consumers lose. Now, Apple are another company with a 30% cut that faced this exact criticism. And one of the responses to that was a small business program, which basically would be a reduced 15% cut on your first million. I think if Steam wanted to do well by the PR here, they would do the same thing. Give indie developers a lower percentage for their first million USD. That would better enable indies to compete on price, and it would mean that more money goes back into those indies, which of course would mean more games for the rest of us
good
and a more
initially,
efficient
yeah.
market. So, Steam did build the best platform, but it does appear that they then made it impossible for anyone else to compete on the one thing that does matter the most, that being pricing. And that brings me back to this survey and what the survey is really telling us. Rocky wanted marketing, they wanted a headline, and they absolutely got it, being able to say 72% of devs think Steam is a monopoly. But these developers are not asking for Steam to be broken up by the government. They're not even asking for Steam to change. They're basically asking for someone, anyone, to give them a competitive alternative.
Nah, I mean, they are asking for Steam to actually be changed because it's clear what they are doing, but I would say that they are just fucking around unnecessarily. Although, I mean, how the fuck does this compute? We have literally good old games that sell to cheaper prices than Steam. I had a price compare for some of them. Yes, they sell cheaper. Huh. I have to dig into it, because if this is the case, then yeah, they're still pussies. By the way, right now, as soon as Steam becomes bad, I will not defend it. But right now, Steam is the best thing we have. This is one of the last standing freaking good stores that we have. As soon as Epic Game takes over, we're fucked. As soon as anything else takes over, we're also fucked. Maybe GOG, if they would take over, that would be fine, but everything else, we're fucked. So, that's how I see it, at least. I just don't believe that some of those corrupt mother flippers didn't go out and just voted in bad faith.
We've had about 2 decades of Steam dominance. Epic tried to compete with their Fortnite money and failed. Amazon tried to compete with their functionally infinite resources and failed. Not because Steam locked them out, but because Steam built something that no one else could match, and then made sure that nobody else could undercut them on price. And that's the real monopoly question here. It's not whether Steam controls the market, because they clearly do. Their market share is just that big. But it's whether they're using that control to keep prices artificially high. Poland thinks they are. The UK thinks they are. The Wolfire lawsuit says they are. And in response, Valve says they're just protecting their platform. But the thing with that is, well, when 37% of developers are depending on you for 90% of their revenue, well, that distinction kinda stops mattering. All this means that we're living in Gabe's world. The question is what happens whenever he's gone, whenever he's not running Valve. And at least based on these numbers...
When Gabe's gone, we could be absolutely fucked. As soon as Gabe's gone, we could be just destroyed. Because of the monopoly. As long as Gabe is here, I don't have worries. As soon as he leaves, we could be extremely fucked.
Nobody has an answer. That's what I would like you to think about. What would lure you away from Steam? Or what do you think Steam...
A better product. Simple as that. a better product. I would have jumped the freaking Epic Games wagon, but their store was so shit that I just stopped. Simple. They have literally, I think at this point, billions maybe. Let's just stay with millions. Millions made of Fortnite. And their store is still shit. The store quality is still shit. So yes, I just know that they aren't investing in the thing they should. They are either one, constantly updating Fortnite. I personally don't give a fuck about it. Or they are greedy and keeping everything to them and don't actually go up on a level with the store. And I include support help with it, because the support on freaking Epic Game Store is shit. It's pure fucking shit. The rest, also shit. So they are definitely not investing in a good product. So, what's the other solution? They are banking, like they're taking the money and just keeping it. That's how I see it. But as it is, acolytes, good night.